Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I am joined by Nick Bush. Welcome, Nick.
Hello there, Amy. Great to be here.
How are you today? What are you up to?
What am I up to? I guess I'm mainly looking forward to my community choir getting back in action tonight. So that's been a gap of 18 months. So I don't know how many people are going to turn up, but hopefully it'll be quite a few. So it'll be good to see some old friends again.
Yeah, I have seen some people do choirs via Zoom, but it's not quite the same, is it?
No, I developed a little skill for video editing, so I put together some of those multi-frame videos, slightly amateurishly, but just good enough to have them published, and that kept us going a bit. So we did 4 of them over the period. Quite a lot of work. Everyone sending stuff in the last minute, and different frame sizes and all kinds of technical fun and games. But yeah, it was good fun to do.
Oh,
but yeah,
fantastic.
No substitute for the real thing.
No, well, I'm sure you're going to have a great fun tonight with whoever turns up. It's still that some people are in the camp of okay to go out and others are still a little bit reticent, which is, rightly so. It's been a very strange sort of 18 months or so and longer. But we've been brought together by the wonderful Kim Hamer. So thank you to Kim. And now it's just a case of let's explore your why and why you do what you do, Nick. So let's get cracking. What is it that you're up to at the moment other than getting ready for your choir tonight?
I've got kind of a couple of things that run in parallel and occasionally cross over. So if you look on my LinkedIn profile, which I'd love people to do after this call, you'll see it says Director of the Centre for Management Consulting Excellence, which is possibly the grandest job title I've had. And it's certainly the grandest job title for a voluntary role that is only part-time. So the Centre for Management Consulting Excellence is kind of fathered, if you like, by the livery company that I'm a member of, with the equally grand title of the Worshipful Company of Management Consultants. And so they sponsor us, keep us going, but we run events which are around sharing good practice and emerging practice and research in management consulting to help people kind of raise their game and deliver more value for clients. So that's taking up a fair bit of my time at the moment. And apart from odd bits of consulting assignments, some of which are pro bono, some of which are paid for, then I have a couple of charities that I am a trustee of, both of which are in the music education field, which I think was the kind of the original spark for this conversation. So I'm probably going to talk more about those than about management consulting.
Well, feel free to share what it is you want to share in whichever of those areas. Have you always been a volunteer in some way or another?
Probably not. No, I think when I was a kid, I joined St John Ambulance and Venture Scouts, which had sort of elements of, well, obviously St John Ambulance did volunteering, and I used to be a beach lifeguard as well. Although nobody's life ever needed saving on the days that we patrolled, which is probably a good thing. So I started out being kind of quite like that, but I guess pressures of jobs and various things kind of took over most of the time. So apart from 1 or 2 bits, then it's only since I've probably got more of a portfolio lifestyle going on that I can spend more time doing those things.
And you mentioned a portfolio lifestyle and a portfolio career working that way. How long has that taken you to get to that point?
I guess it was about 14 or 15 years ago when I gave up my full-time job, took voluntary redundancy, and then set myself up as a freelance consultant. Although in effect that resulted in quite a few long-term full-time contracts, which is all well and good, but it almost felt like having a permanent job again. So again, not much of a portfolio in that regard. But over the last 3 or 4 years, then that's changed, and so I've got these various things that I'm able to devote more time to, which is nice.
And how much of your management consultancy do you bring into your volunteering areas?
Quite a bit, actually. I did, back in about 2012, approach one of the charities that I'm now a trustee of, and sort of in a rather naive way, and I'd known them for quite a long period of time, walked up and said, I think you might need some help from me. I can do all these things. And it didn't really turn out like that, because I think what I realized is that organizations have to get to a certain level of maturity in terms of size and the complexity of the issues that they're dealing with, when they can't be handled by, say, the founders or the management team. And this, at the time, there were really only about 3 or 4 people working in the charity, so almost that's too much for bringing any kind of external help in, other than practical help. In fact, what I ended up doing was organising a concert for them, so I was able to help out in some regard in that. But that particular charity has developed significantly over the last few years, and I've been able to bring some skills to bear in the last 4 years to help them, which has been great. So that's now not quite the culmination of bringing my 2 worlds together, as it were, but it's certainly a lot more synergy than I thought would be possible, say 5 or 10 years ago.
So you've got the synergy, and you just said that you didn't think it was possible. Why did you not think it was possible to bring your passion and purpose together with your profession?
Well, I suppose it was that I'd always seen music, which has been a kind of lifelong, almost a hobby, really. Well, yeah, I suppose a hobby, rather than a job. I started playing the guitar at about the age of 5 or 6, and never really got to grips with it until I was in my teens, and then one could argue I still haven't got to grips with it in my 60s, but if you've ever heard me play, that's because I'm very bad at practicing. So it's always been going on, and I've been in bands and various things at various times in my life when that opportunity's come up. And on possibly 1 or 2 occasions, I've actually used my guitar in some consulting work. I think once was a social event that the clients organised, where they wanted somebody to play along with a song that they'd put together, and the other one was actually I brought it into the closing elements of a workshop. And actually that was quite funny, because it turned out there was somebody who could play the guitar better than me, and he rather gently took the guitar off me and proceeded to strum away at it while we sang the song that brought the whole team together. So it was a beautiful moment, but probably one that I wouldn't advise consultants to adopt much in their practice, unless they're extremely good. There are plenty of consultants around. There's a I don't know if he's still around. There's an American consultant and academic called John Cow, who specializes in creativity and innovation, and he's an accomplished jazz pianist. So I'm always a bit wary of role models, but you do kind of think, I'd quite like to be that guy, the one who could actually sit down and reel off a few standards in the corner. Whereas if anyone hands me a guitar and expects me to do that, I usually kind of pass it on and say, no, I don't really do that. I just make noise. Just you play, I'll sing. So
is it the voice, or is it the instrument that you like the most?
I'm probably more into the instrument. Singing, something I've only discovered relatively recently. The choir that I referred to earlier, it was started in 2012. And 2012 was just a great year. Lots of fantastic things happened. It must have been the whole Olympics effect or something. But that started then, and I thought, I should give it a go. It always sounds like fun. It was off the back of all those Gareth Malone programs, and I thought it looks so great. And it's been going ever since, well, apart from the pandemic. So we have a lot of fun. We're not going to win any prizes for vocal ability.
But there's something special that happens with a choir, isn't it? The bringing together, and you'd already talked about the synergy of your work and your sort of passions, but also the synergy of people is incredible.
It is, yeah. I mean, you are there for a common purpose, even though you don't recognize it. And it's partly to make music, but it's the togetherness side of it, I think, in a choir that, that's why they've been going for years, various ones. And as I say, I'm a kind of a late convert to this.
So, late convert into the music side of things, into the choir, but you talked about a common purpose and togetherness. Have you always lived with purpose in your own life?
Definitely not. No, will say at this point that I've had a bit of since we last spoke a few months back, I've been sort of slightly wrestling with this idea of purpose. Not that I don't feel that I lack it, but I come to I feel it's almost become the sort of new age religion of the last few years. And not that that's a bad thing, but that there are some elements of it that make it seem like, oh, if you just had this, your life would be sorted. And that's not obviously what it's about. But it does give you a certain amount of clarity about what's important. And if you've got the luxury of being able to choose where to focus your time, then that's very good, because it helps you make decisions about what you do and what you don't do. Where I think it is a bit of an issue is a lot of the time your purpose in life, particularly earlier on, is bringing enough money in to pay the rent or the mortgage or support a family. And so that is your driving purpose a lot of the time, or it consumes your time. I think where it can be very difficult for people is if there's a big mismatch between what you're doing day to day that you really don't enjoy or doesn't excite you, and then trying to plot a way out of it. Now, I've been extremely fortunate that I'm not going to give my career history here, but I started out life going to university to study chemistry with the view of going to teach it. But luckily for generations of children, that didn't happen. So I discovered computers, which hadn't been invented for that long, I think, when I went to university. And so I thought, oh, I really enjoy this. This is much more interesting. So I tried to spend as much time on computer course units as I could, and then got a job with a software house. And that kept me going for about 7 years. And after about 7 years, I got taken off my project. In fact, the client cancelled it, and I was hanging around, and the company I worked for said, oh, could you go and work on the project office for this consulting assignment that we've got? And I had no idea that I wanted to do management consultancy, and wasn't even sure I knew what it was. So I found myself managing a it wasn't a multi-client, but it was a multi-consultant project with about 6 different firms in the Department of Trade and Industry. It stuck down in Millbank Tower, and I really hadn't got a clue what I was doing for about 3 months. And then eventually, when I got to grips with it and pulled all the various elements of the report together that we were working on, I found that was actually more stimulating than what I had been doing, which I didn't think was actually possible, because I was really enjoying my job. So then I moved kind of deliberately within that firm to major on consulting. So in a sense, there was, I suppose, looking back at it, what kind of, if you strip away all the kind of elements of it, what was driving me in that was that I really liked solving problems, which is not something you do when you're studying chemistry. You don't get proficient enough to be able to solve problems. If you go on to make a career out of it, you probably are solving difficult problems in that subject. But through writing computer software and then writing reports and then kind of analysing problems, I felt I was sort of helping people. So there was something that I found fulfilling in that. And then my career kind of evolved in different firms, still sticking with the consulting side of it. So that, I think through this conversation, I'm discovering that I did actually have a purpose. I just didn't realise it at the time, because my head, if you like, was preoccupied with raising a family and all the stuff that goes with that, and making sure that we could pay the bills.
And it is funny, isn't it, how you just don't realise that there is that thread that runs throughout, but you don't see it until you start to reflect. And often, as you say, you're so busy just in that autopilot role of running a household, running a family, and raising children, which does occupy a lot of your time for sure. So you spoke about how you've been wrestling with the concept of purpose, and that it's almost become a bit of a new age religion, say, but it has been at the forefront of our minds for millennia. It's just a case of each sort of generation interprets it differently. So what would you say your interpretation of purpose is right now?
I think it's finding that thing that really gets you up and motivated in the morning, and it's when you're experiencing it. So I've had this a couple of times recently when I've been in my charity meetings. So they're both in music education, and I realised probably about 10 or so years ago that was something I really did care about, and it kind of almost came out of nowhere, because obviously I'd been involved in music the education side of it, I'd been on courses and things like that, but it didn't really, kind of the penny didn't drop. And I thought, well, I get so much out of music. It's just so, and I could see that a lot of children didn't, because music education's underfunded, or it's very badly done. It's quite badly done when I was at school, to be honest. And so I thought, that if I can do something to help bring that into young people's lives, then that would be something I could really get behind. And I've been fortunate to have a couple of opportunities to do that. And when I'm in those meetings, and it didn't start immediately, because a lot of I was on a kind of learning curve, and I thought, actually, I'm really enthusiastic. I don't know that much about this, or even how charities work necessarily. But then now I'm at a point where I can think, I'm in a meeting and I go, this is the place where I'm kind of, I feel I have to be here, and occasionally I'm adding value, hopefully. So yes, that's sort of, I am starting to realize, there's a purpose at work here.
And what is it that you're looking to create? What is the transformation or the impact that you want to achieve to say, right, I've done that. I know that that's going to be the next generation sorted.
Well, I think the first thing that you have to learn is to get away from the heroic model that you're going to do this all on your own. So that said, I've got a kind of this kind of shows up in my consulting work when I've been with clients. I have a tendency to want to build networks of people within an organization. So, and I'm not so much doing this at the moment because it would take quite a lot of effort. I'm not sure I have the bandwidth available, but trying to connect with people who also share that passion. Because there's lots of good stuff going on. It's not just in the two organizations that I support. So bringing together that coalition of people who see the role of music and arts education more broadly, and how vital it is, not just from a kind of, the children who do it, but actually from an economic point of view. I'm not talking about the creative industries, which we are very strong in this country, but actually giving children and young people a broad education and start in life will produce people who go into business or whatever element it is, who've got a much broader outlook and who can think more creatively and more laterally about the problems that they face. So I fundamentally believe that whatever kind of political persuasion you're from, if you want a kind of strong economy, you have to invest very broadly in the subjects that get taught in school. Not just focus on the obvious ones, if you like. I mean, sure, we need doctors and lawyers even. But we want those doctors and lawyers to actually be able to think more broadly. That's what I always encourage my two sons to do. We both used to say to them when they were struggling with their practice, just keep at it, because when you are a doctor or a lawyer or a management consultant or whatever, then you'll have all that wonderful technique to fall back on. They've gone into music, so obviously we over-encourage them on that front, but they are living their purpose already. I could see from about 10 or 12 years ago when I first saw him leading an ensemble, my oldest son had that kind of spark about him when working in music with young children. And similarly, to watch my younger son, he's a professional musician, to watch him on stage is to see someone who is completely immersed and involved in what he's doing. And, as somebody who loves music and actually loves the kind of music that they both play and both into, that gives me a lot of pleasure.
And how ironic or maybe hypocritical that you mentioned earlier that you're very bad at practicing your guitar, and yet you advocated that both kids practice their music.
Well, I've been thinking about this. I felt that I made a remark to somebody else this week that I learnt a lot from my father. Well, my father and my mother, really, but usually in a slightly negative way. To think, well, I don't want to do what they did. So, for example, my parents ran a hotel and then a restaurant until they retired early, as it happened, and they didn't really like it that much. They were good at it, but they my father took it on because he inherited it from his father, and he just was miserable about it most of the time. And he was at his happiest when he retired. Sadly, didn't last that long before he passed away. But so therefore, I kind of think, well, no, I'm not going to live my life like that. So I was reflecting on this, and I thought, well, my goodness, my two sons must have looked at me and thought, I don't want to live my life like that. I'll go into music, not consulting.
Yeah, it works both ways. And you talked about the music education being underfunded and badly done. And it's something that doesn't just exist in music, it's in all of the creative subjects, that there is a huge sort of prominence with the more traditional subjects. And yet, it's, as you said, we've still done really well as a country in producing creative people. So where's the mismatch, and what do you see as if we did fund more of the creative side and music and the arts? What changes would you see come into effect?
I think we would have people. I mean, I've encountered a lot of people as clients or as people that I've worked with who have perhaps a rather narrow view of what's possible in the business world. And part of your role as a consultant is often to change that and gently open people up to how they might change the way they work or the strategies that they pursue. So I think, and I'm not claiming that my interest in music gives me any kind of a special gift or insight into that, but I think in general, if you've encouraged people to explore other things than just their core subject, that kind of opens up neural pathways in the brain. And again, I'm not a neurologist, but I kind of feel that this is an element that does happen, that makes them see problems in a different way. It's not the answer to everything, because you still need people who are good at maths. And quite frankly, getting over the prejudice against maths is something we should be doing in education as well. And there are some great creative teachers out there who do that. Similarly, all the subjects you do at school are all good, but they could be, in some senses, brought together more, and there could be more emphasis placed on things like communication, so that you're also encouraging good kind of broad skills in children and young people. I know they do that quite a bit in the States. There's more of an emphasis on speaking in public, which is why often you find that Americans are generally better at and more confident, or come across more confidently, than perhaps British children have traditionally done. I think that's changing, though.
It's really interesting, and you talked there about possibility, about what's possible, not only in the business environment but also in life. So where does that mindset come from? Is it something that you've had to work on, or have you always sort of adopted that?
I think I've had to work on it a bit, because I think, as I say, it's kind of getting out of the shadow of your parents. I mean, my parents have been dead for over 30 years, and they must have been quite optimistic a lot of the time and quite happy, because otherwise I would have been quite depressed a lot of the time. But my father particularly, was a slightly fatalistic view that, bad stuff would happen to him because we had kind of bad luck. And actually, what I've learned is, what is it? What's the Invictus thing? I'm the captain of my soul, or something. You're basically in charge of your own destiny. I mean, you may choose to ascribe some of it to a higher power. Fine if that works for you, but you really have to take responsibility and think creatively about the issues that beset you. And sometimes they're terrible. I don't think they ever were, particularly in my parents' case. But I had to kind of work at it over a number of years to think, well, actually, sometimes things happen that are not ideal. What are you going to do to work out of it? You ask for help. That's one thing. You look for people who can help you. So, and that leads to other connections and possibilities. So, yeah, it's taken a while, but I think I'm probably at my most optimistic, which is probably quite good given the times we're in, because it's very easy to flip over and think, well, the whole world's terrible. Just look at Afghanistan or somewhere. So you have to also get some of the things in perspective and affect the things you can affect.
I mean, you're talking about positivity and combining that with other elements such as creativity and opportunity. And it's starting to sound very, very Sir Ken Robinson here. And I know he was a big advocate of the element, and you've talked about elements here, and finding your element is definitely the sort of focus of our show here. And what is it that you have identified with that now is guiding you forward?
I'm not sure I can give it a specific name. I think it's just I filled in a form recently that said what 5 words would you use to describe you, and I said glass always full, something to that. It was 5 words. Glass is always full, I think. And then what would other people say about you? Which is he owes me a pint, because I'm very bad at buying around for some reason. But I'm just waffling now to get off the difficult question. But I think it's just, as you say, it's almost kicking against. If you've been brought up to be kind of have these sort of perhaps rather fatalistic views imprinted on you, it's kind of getting out from underneath that, and it's recognizing, those kind of games that are going on within your own psyche. I have actually been doing quite a bit of work on that myself over the last few months, and finding it quite revealing. Sometimes you kind of get these little insights, and you tend to run away from them a bit, thinking, oh, yeah, that is a kind of self-limiting behavior. Yeah, I'll just acknowledge that and then maybe come back to it later when I'm feeling in the mood. But, I think you have to do the work on yourself. I'm not particularly disciplined about it. I've got some current practices that I do that don't take up too much of my time, which kind of keep me ticking over on it. But I'm conscious of the fact I could probably do a bit more in that regard.
That's really interesting. And you say the glass is always full, and maybe that's why you're bad at
half full.
half full. Okay.
As opposed to half empty.
Oh, there we go. So the glass is always half full, which means the reason why you're not buying a round is because you don't actually finish your pint in time to buy the next round.
Well, there may be that, but I think some people might attest to a different view of me.
So you talked about, let's go back to 2012, and there was that Olympics effect, and a huge year for many reasons. It was a fantastic year, and being in London, you couldn't not see the benefit of what the Olympics did. And you said that you had the choir and that you started to do lots of other things as well. That's almost 10 years now. So where do you see the next 10 years going for you, Nick?
I'm hopefully going to continue with this mixture that I've got, and I keep sometimes lie awake in the middle of the night going, oh, is that really the right way to do? Could I do more of one thing or less of the other? But I think managing a sort of reasonably healthy balance, and also, I'm at a time in my life where I have the luxury of being able to pursue some things that are just my own interest. So I am trying to devote a bit more time to music. I've just put all my guitars together on a guitar rack. I can look at them all together now rather than just bumping into them around the house.
So how many have you got?
I've got 7, actually, which is more. It's about 6 more than I actually need. Yes, yeah.
And how do they differ?
Oh, do we really want to go into this? It's very technical. One's a semi-acoustic, which is probably my favourite one. That's from my sort of jazz years. One's an acoustic 6-string, because you have to have an acoustic guitar if you're a proper guitarist. That's the one that was used in my client assignments. One's an electric, which I also enjoy playing a lot. And then I have 3 basses, because I also spent quite a bit of time playing the bass. Actually, fairly recently bought an acoustic one, because I was playing in an environment where amplification wasn't really that possible. So yeah, there's a business case for all of them. And the 7th one is quite a nice story. I posted the picture of them all on Facebook, and the person who had originally had my 7th guitar made for him back in the mid-70s. He'd say he was in a band. He handed that on to somebody who sold it to me for £5. It's a homemade guitar, it's had quite a nice sound. Actually, it's still got quite a nice action for something that was lashed together, including a bit of an old Flymo blade, he told me. And he's actually, he's moved to New Zealand, but if he comes over here, I'm going to give him the guitar back. I would love him to have it, just to have that connection.
Yeah, I love that. So what's the vision? Where are we going? Have you got an idea? And I know you said it's not your own heroic journey, but you're going to be bringing other people alongside with you. Is there a particular aim that you've got in mind?
I won't say that I've kind of articulated it and stuck it on a piece of paper behind my monitor, because whilst I kind of think that I should do that kind of thing, I end up being not the person who does that kind of thing. What I would love to see myself being part of in the next 5 to 10 years is a group of people, a wider network of people who act together to bring some of this kind of creative and very positive input around music and music education together. And I don't know how that's going to happen, but the fact that I'm talking about it on this podcast and you have a very large audience may mean that if anyone's made it this far, then they might even want to get in touch with me and say, here's an idea.
That sounds wonderful. And some kind of art centre or something like that, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the charities that I'm working with, the one that I've known for longer out of the two, is building an art centre at the moment. So just this week, last week, we signed the contract with the people who are going to fit out the space that we've got. It's an organisation called World Heartbeat, if I'm allowed to publicise them. And our Performance and Education Centre, the new one, will be in Embassy Gardens, literally a stone's throw. Well, you're obviously not allowed to throw stones from the American Embassy or anything. There's lots of security guards around it. So a lovely, safe area to come and enjoy music in Vauxhall in South London, which is an area of massive development, if anyone's ever driven through it or been past it on the train. So that's very exciting.
I remember when the American Embassy was still in Grosvenor Square, and then they obviously had the purpose-built new building over in Nine Elms in Vauxhall Way. So, yeah.
So, yes, that's part of the vision for this time next year. It'll be open, all being well.
So, hobby, job, where does music fit in and where does management consulting fit in now? Are they both hobbies?
Well, the fact that I'm able to use some consulting techniques in running a change board on a monthly basis for the World Heartbeat organisation and to help them with developing their customer-centric view of the world that they'll be working in. Again, it's not just me. There's lots of people with particular expertise that are brought in to help out and do probably the majority of the work. Mine's a very part-time involvement. Yeah, so I'm able to bring what expertise I have in that. Also through the worshipful company, livery company, we do a lot of pro bono work for organisations. So I'm just starting one of those, for an organisation that works with young people in a related field. So that will be interesting. So if I can keep a supply of those coming in, that would be good. And, just hope to keep that rolling for as long as I can do things that are useful.
Fantastic. So it's not a case now of that if you had this, then it's more a case of just, as you said right at the beginning, having that clarity of what's important to you and then choosing how you can then apportion your time and effort and focus into those areas.
It is, yes. If you have the luxury of being able to do that, which I think, I'm not into luxury generally in terms of a lifestyle, but I've realised that is a very fortunate position to have arrived at in my mid-60s. So therefore, it kind of behoves me. I do feel it's almost a moral obligation to use that time constructively.
So how would people, you mentioned earlier, you've got LinkedIn. How else would people get in touch with you, Nick?
I do have a website. It's called knittingfog.blog. Which I always think is memorable. I'm not sure if it is that memorable.
How did you come to that name?
Actually, that's a relatively recent one because I had to set up a limited company when I went freelance, and I called that Open Chord, which still exists as a business name and a site name as well. So the two point to the same place because I felt I had a kind of a musical connection. Knitting Fog, I think, is to do with that problem-solving side of things. So in my consulting work, if I can bring anything of value to it, it's sometimes creating sort of, a bit of clarity out of uncertainty and ambiguity, which is all good consultants would do that. I wouldn't claim I am unique in that, but I also thought no one else seems to have that as a site name, so I'll have that one and put .blog on the end so it rhymes.
Brilliant, I love that. So knittingfog.blog. Perfect. Great. Nick, it has been an absolute pleasure. And I thank Kim for introducing us once again. It really has been really interesting just following this journey that you've gone through and also understanding more about how you've found that spark and how you've manage to pass on the spark to your children, which is, what you really want to do, and how you've learnt from your father in several ways of almost reversing what he said to do. It's been really interesting. So thank you for sharing that. How would you like to leave today's episode?
I think if I can come with a kind of Jerry Springer final thought, that's what you're looking for. I think if you're able to articulate a kind of vision or purpose, I wouldn't get too hung up about not being able to achieve it immediately. Because if you keep at it, even if you have to deviate for material reasons or personal circumstances or whatever, then if you keep at it, things will eventually fall into place. Hopefully. I can't guarantee it, but I'm only a consultant, so I'm just advising, not giving you a complete solution. So don't send any lawyers to knittingfog.blog.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of my inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. I help people to focus on their why with clarity, uniting their passion with their purpose with a plan, to create the life they truly desire. If you would like me to help you focus on your why, then please book a free 20-minute coaching call via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the Friday Focus weekly newsletter via my website, amyrowlandson.com. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.